And a new track layout has caught up many of the drivers already. What does the next practice session hold in store for us? It's time for wise heads out there. And I can't think of a wiser pair than John and Ben Edwards. And please note, I did say wise heads, not old ones.
Thank you very much, Matt. Well, we'll try and come up with a few pearls of wisdom ourselves this morning as we get into the free practice session. We've got the first 45 minutes coming up, then the half-hour break and another 45 minutes. And they're going to continue this process of learning the track, developing. And we'll have to see, John, whether Renault have made a few differences to their cars, because they really were struggling yesterday, weren't they?
Yes, they did struggle, of course. Jarno Trulli, he stopped in the session, and then Jenson Button just went backwards rather than forwards. Very disappointing for Renault. And Mike Gascoigne said they got their simulation wrong. But also, talking about getting something wrong, it's generally felt that Bridgestone, although they were the quickest two cars on the track, or tyres on the track with Ferrari, nevertheless, the Bridgestone tyre seems capable of doing a 24-hour race rather than an hour-and-a-half Grand Prix, such as the durability of that tyre. Now, whether their optional tyre will be any more competitive than the prime tyre is, we wait to see. But certainly a lot of miles were carried out, and very often we noted yesterday that the quickest lap was being done on a set of tyres that had done maybe up to 30 miles, 30 laps.
Well, of course, the battle between Bridgestone and Michelin continues here today. Qualifying has gone the way of Michelin over the last 5 Grand Prix, as we all know. And in their press conference, Bridgestone said yesterday that, well, they are looking at qualifying. They do want to try and redress the balance somewhat. But Juan Pablo Montoya's performances have been outstanding. The problem is they haven't always got it together in the race quite as well, because as we've seen, particularly in France last week, in race conditions, the tyre performance drops away somewhat and they're not able to perform at that level throughout the race distance. Now, I noticed from the press releases yesterday, Sam Michael at Williams saying that they have been working on race setup, concentrating on the race rather than on qualifying. And likewise, Bridgestone in their press conference saying, well, they're beginning to work more on qualifying, perhaps to redress the balance. So Michelin going one way, working hard on race setup, and Bridgestone perhaps going slightly the other way to try and even up the score in those qualifying stakes.
And of course, everything is completely mixed up because they come to effectively a brand new circuit, and a circuit that offers quite high levels of grip, but partly because there's new tarmac done, also because teams are running higher levels of downforce than they would normally do at the Hockenheim Ring. Remember, the old circuit was made up of those very long straights, 4 of them. Now there's virtually no straight other than that very long parabolic corner, and people are going quicker in corners than they're accustomed to doing. And Renault, for some reason, seemed to be the one team that did get caught out by that, and it was pretty evident that, you know, Jenson Button 19th quickest, Jarno Trulli stopping in that session 20th quickest, and then the next 2 cars are the 2 Minardis, and that must have been a bitter pill for the Renault team to have to swallow, even though it was an unofficial session.
Well, if Renault didn't get their sums quite right, Williams didn't do a bad job. As I said, they were working on race setup, and Sam Michael expressing that. And in fact, Bruce Jones has just caught up with the Chief Operations Officer at Williams, Sam Michael.
Sam Michael, you've had night and yesterday evening to think about changing the car for today. The Ferrari's at the front, new circuit. Are you sure which way you're going today?
I think so. I think a lot of the changes that we've made are for qualifying now for today. Yesterday we spent a lot of time on race setup. Obviously a new circuit, it takes the drivers a little bit of time to learn what parts they need to work on of the setup. But obviously today we're quite confident about qualifying. We're still thinking about the race tomorrow because of the performances we've had in the last 3 or 4 Grand Prix. Now, Bridgestone seems to have had the advantage in recent races. Michelin hopefully fighting back. What the drivers' report of the tyres so far? The 2 tyres that they've got here look okay, and both of them have their sort of advantages and disadvantages. I think it'd be hard to say that Bridgestone, or the Bridgestones that have won the last few races have also been on Ferraris. If you look at Michelin's performance in Magny-Cours, it was definitely good enough to win the Grand Prix on a McLaren, so it's hard to point the finger at Michelin when they're producing tyres that are capable of doing that.
OK, Sam, thanks. Best of luck.
Must be a bit painful to have to say on McLaren the Michelin tyres work so well. Of course, at Magny-Cours, Williams didn't really quite seem to get it right for the race.
No, and McLaren really, I mean, they worked very hard. They had a test done at Paul Ricard the week before. That was a closed-door test, no press allowed, and they made some progress there, and that came through very clearly in Magny-Cours. Both David Coulthard, but in particular Kimi Raikkonen, doing a stunning job in that Grand Prix just 1 week ago. And well, you know, Williams have got the power, they've got that engine, a superb engine from BMW, but maybe they've got to match that with the chassis side. We know that they've been very hard on the rear tyres. They wore those rear tyres out of the Nürburgring, and it's affected them in other Grand Prix. they've somehow or other got to get that balance, a more equal balance, something that doesn't just hurt the rear tyre so badly as it's done in the past.
Well, the action yesterday in the free practice sessions, I'm glad to say, saw all 22 cars taking to the track. Both Arrows were out there, and in fact they did a good job. Heinz-Harald Frentzen was 10th fastest, his teammate Enrique Bernoldi right behind, 11th fastest. The great news was that cars were on track, and in fact Peter Winters managed to catch up with team boss Tom Walkinshaw.
Tom, good morning, great to see you, and the car's going very well yesterday.
Yeah, both of them went well, but you know, we never know on a Friday these days, so we'll see what happens today. It's a little bit cold for the tyres, but you know, hoping the temperature will come up later.
You told us in Manicure there'd be news as the future of the team. Anything we can talk about at the moment?
No, I mean, we're here, we're doing the job properly, so.
In terms of investment, in terms of possible takeover?
Yeah, there are a lot of things going on, isn't there?
So it's still as we were in Manicure, but we'd have to assume we're in better shape than we were there.
Things are progressing okay at the moment, so it just takes time, you know.
Good, well, very best of luck, and let's hope the trend continues today.
Thank you.
Well, the important thing is the cars are running. That's what we want to see, and they were running effectively. Now, Eddie Irvine, you said, John, made some good comments about this track, some very positive comments. In fact, the other thing he said yesterday was, as we saw, the track layout does increase the chance of driver error, and I think he was looking at that as well as a possibility for excitement in the race and a possibility for making up places.
Well, I think Eddie's been watching our show, because pretty much all the things that we mentioned prior to going on air on Friday were very much in that direction. It's a circuit that is being geared to producing more exciting motor racing at the Hockenheim Ring, while everybody has in the past enjoyed the high-speed run down those 4 long straights. Nevertheless, the nature of the circuit now, this revised layout, hopefully will make for very exciting Grand Prix motor racing, and that long left-hand parabolic corner going into the hairpin bend is an obvious place to see people taking a shot down the inside, and there will be other corners around the circuit also. So the prospect of 67 laps of Grand Prix motor racing rather than a 45-lap high-speed demonstration is evident to all, I think.
Now, this is the new section that we're looking at. As they turn off in the top of the picture, they're coming off the old section that used to go through the woods, and they go through this long curving left-hander. This is effectively a straight. It's all flat out. It's called the Parabolica, and they were up to 200 miles an hour just about here as they then come down to this brand new hairpin. Very tight. We saw a number of spins down at this section of the track, but that's only to be expected, really, and this is where they're hoping that the overtaking will occur. Now they come up out of the hairpin, they turn right through a flat-out right-hander that you can see, and then through a fairly twisty section which includes another hairpin left before they make their way back round towards the stadium.
And I think it's those 2 corners, it's the one off the old straight and the one back onto, that Ralf Schumacher in particular thought were the best 2 corners on the circuit. Ones where the driver really gets that sort of feeling of, yeah, isn't it great to be a Grand Prix driver? Nevertheless, there are other corners around the circuit, and of course the stadium section of the circuit, which we've been discussing in the pre-show and that of course has changed in character because the cars are now carrying a lot more downforce than they would have done on the original circuit layout, and that means, you know, that, for example, the 2 corners, the Opel and the south curve, which leads onto pit straight, which used to be a bit airy-fairy, float the car out to the outside and let it hopefully come back and you might get the apex 1 and 5 times. Now the car is just glued to the racetrack, and I mean, just listen to the amount of throttle usage when we go on board with some of the front runners. It is absolutely stunning. And again, then that sort of run down into the Nord curve, which again braking almost to the point where I think in qualifying we're going to see people attempting to go through that Nord curve, not lifting off but just using left foot braking just to check the speed, but keeping their throttles open. I mean, it's going to be truly spectacular, I think, in qualifying.
It should be a good one. Another session looking forward to the battle between Williams and Ferrari and McLaren. McLaren, remember, yesterday were again the fastest of the Michelin runners. An impressive performance from Kimi Räikkönen, 3rd behind the 2 Ferraris, and Coulthard as well, who was only a fraction of a second behind his teammate on the day that they were announced to be driving once again next year for McLaren Mercedes, and the day, of course, that Mika Häkkinen did announce his retirement. So confirmation of all that. Alexander Wurz has been confirmed as the 3rd driver on a long-term contract again with McLaren Mercedes. So they've got their driving lineup all sorted out. At Jaguar, however, we still wait to see exactly what's going to happen. Good job from Eddie Irvine. He was congratulated by Niki Lauda yesterday after putting in the full programme. No problems on his car. He ended up 6th fastest.
And right now Eddie Irvine, well, pretty much the only car out on track with the exception of Jacques Villeneuve, who we saw Irvine passing just a couple of corners before. So Irvine comes up to complete the first flying lap of Saturday morning free practice, and it's a 1:23. And of course miles away from what he did yesterday, some 6 seconds slower. But that's just an out lap, get a feel for the circuit. As Tom Walkinshaw mentioned, temperatures are a little bit below what we saw on Friday afternoon. Nevertheless, a lot of work to be done by the teams, and this tyre choice well, we take that as a yes. The nod was a yes. Nevertheless, Eddie just going through the process, going back to Irvine. Expect to see that the ambient and track temperatures rise gradually over the morning, but of course getting to 1 o'clock for qualifying, well, that hopefully will be up in the middle 20s, and temperature will suit both the tyre companies. As Barrichello on the Bridgestone tyre, from what I learned yesterday, that appeared to be able to go a very, very long way indeed, and towards the end of the first practice session, Ferrari with Barrichello and Michael Schumacher, I believe on the original set of tyres, did a time which was very little different to what they achieved in the second part of Friday's free practice, only about 0.2 of a second quicker, and no doubt they'd put in a fresher set of tyres to achieve that time.
So Barrichello on circuit, and in fact only 2 cars on track at the moment. Just a quick point to mention that yesterday the Formula 3000s qualified. Giorgio Pantano took pole position for Coloni. It's the first pole position for the Italian in 3000, and in fact the first pole for the team as well. Thomas Enger joined him on the front row after problems in the first session, but put it together in the end of the second session. Championship leader Sebastian Bourdais, 4th on the grid for the Formula 3000 race. So just to update you there on some information that occurred here at Hockenheim yesterday. The support races. We'll be covering the Porsche Super Cup race, of course, later on this weekend, straight after the morning warm-up. They're still to have their second qualifying session. The Australian Alexander Davison has been running well so far this weekend, and we'll keep an eye on their progress. Also interesting news regarding a mate of yours. I noticed, John, that Trevor Foster, who was MD, Managing Director at Jordan, I gather is now doing some work for BAR Honda, so the changes amongst team personnel occurring at all levels.
Yes, it's a business where there's a limited option of where you can go, and Trevor's helping out with some projects with BAR Honda and Brackley, and where he will end up in the future, well, that's something Trevor could answer. Unfortunately, he's not at the circuit to do that for us, otherwise we could have sent down our man in the pit lane and asked him the question directly.
Well, David Richards saying yesterday that at the moment it's just a short-term contract, that Trevor Foster is involved in a particular project there, but we'll wait and see. An interesting situation. Of course, Jenson Button will be going to that team at the end of this season, and to see just how well it develops, and joining, well, we presume at the moment he'll be joining Jacques Villeneuve, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, just getting a look down around the front wing and the aerodynamics of the McLaren, getting a view of that twin keel system that Peter was talking about, introduced by Sauber last year and picked up by, well, just about half the field, maybe a little bit more, but most notably not by Ferrari or by Williams, and maybe we'll see something coming along in the 2003 Williams, more so maybe than Ferrari. The philosophy, the aerodynamic philosophy at Ferrari appears to be very much more towards the rear of the car, and one must say, I think Ferrari might have it right.
Well, they seem to be doing everything pretty well this year, except for getting Rubens Barrichello off the line at the start of the formation laps. This man, Olivier Panis, quick look at him. He was fast in the first session, had problems in the second session yesterday, but BAR Honda did look to be going quite well. Fernando Alonso, the man who'll be taking over the seat from Jenson Button, and looking longingly inside the cockpit right now as well.
And you wonder what Jenson must be thinking, that he's giving up, he's been forced out of the team, and Alonso's going to take his place. Alonso even younger than Jenson Button, but you look at Alonso there, there's a young man who's got an ambition, and he's on him. His face just tells you everything you want to know, and that is the reason I believe why Renault have decided to take Alonso in place of Button. Jenson is a super young driver. I mean, he's got huge ability and potential, but there's just something Alonso just tells me, or I can see in his face, and the way he just moves around, that there's a kid that in the future, in the second half maybe, or even in the middle of this decade, is going to become a major force in Grand Prix racing.
There's a great view looking down over the hairpin, and you can see the amount of runoff they've put in there. Plenty of space if there is a problem on the run down to the hairpin to be able to sort it out. That's Alex Young just heading around that section. He did a good job yesterday. Alex Young probably had one of his best runs of the year, despite not being able to finish off the second session because he beached it over at turn 2, put it over the curb in a spin and couldn't get it going again. But up to that point, he was matching his teammate Mark Webber very closely and seemed to enjoy the track. So we'll keep an eye on him. Much more likely to qualify based on his performances yesterday.
He did a very good job. In fact, in the first part of the Friday practice, he was within about less than a tenth of a second of Mark Webber. And Mark is being trumpeted as being a bit of a star of the future. A name being etched in, let's say penciled in, as potential Jaguar driver. Though, having said what we said yesterday, that Eddie Irvine's position seemingly is becoming slightly stronger again. And two very good performances from Eddie in Silverstone. And then again coming here after the French Grand Prix, I should say, sorry, to the German Grand Prix. But Alex Young, that's not what you're expected to do. You're allowed one of those apparently in qualifying in your 12 laps anymore, and then those times will be discounted. But just going back to Irvine, it seems that his position there has improved considerably since the French Grand Prix and of course here on Friday's practice.
Yes, good job, as we said, 6th fastest yesterday. Let's ride with Alex. Coming down, this is the high-speed section, 200 mile an hour. Well, maybe not with an Asia-Tech engine, but nearly. Now down into the hairpin.
He was braking inside that 100 metres. So, I mean, in spite of top speed, not as quite as quick as a Ferrari, nevertheless, that's a very late brake from that very high speed.
Flat out. He actually changed up in the middle of the right-hander. Now, this is the hairpin left. This is the section Ralph said he liked so much. Listen out for this next bit. Yeah, he changes gear early and is a bit off the power. That's the corner where we were talking earlier, where we're going to notice some differences between drivers.
Yes, I think that's the corner Ralph thinks, and I think it's probably the most difficult corner on the circuit in terms of you always feel you could have gone through it quicker having just gone through it, but you never quite managed to get around to achieving your ambition. Nevertheless, Alex Young very much off the throttle, just basically just a little bit of pickup on the throttle and well, just taking it easy. There's no need to go out and try and do anything too spectacular. This is the end of his 4th lap of the day. Alex Young 1:23.043, contrasting to a 1:20.1 he set on Friday afternoon.
Much neater through that first corner that time. Managed to clip the apex. Here comes Salo. This could be fastest. Yes, it is. Mika Salo taking the fastest time from Eddie Irvine. In the press conference yesterday, just listening a little bit to the radio, Ove Anderson explained that the problem that both engines suffered in Manicure, and remember we saw a spectacular failure for Salo and McNish spinning on his own oil after his engine went, they had Conrod failures. Apparently it's the first time it had happened this season, but they have addressed that problem.
Yes, I mean obviously it's been I think a batch problem of Conrods. There's no reason, unless there's been a change in design of the Conrod or all the associated parts, the bolts and whatever, the nuts. So they could remove those and either replace them with a different batch, or if it was a new design, put the old design back in. But Michael Schumacher mercurially once again on his way, fastest so far in the first sector by well, just about a second from anybody. The previous quickest we had seen was from Mark Webber, in fact, looking down the list of times. And Michael stunning as usual. De La Rosa out in track, also pretty quick in that first sector, but Michael Schumacher 1 second up already on that split time.
Did end up fastest yesterday in the Friday free practice ahead of teammate Rubens Barrichello, the two of them faster than the McLarens by only a little amount.
Well, he's going into the pits.
Is he? No, he's staying out.
He backed off big time coming through that stadium section. Now, whether he was fastest in both sectors, for what reason he did that, we're slightly bemused to know, but Michael has no doubt got his own reasons. But let's watch Pedro de la Rosa, who's also doing a good job. This is his first timed lap out, and he's got personal bests on first and second sector.
Spanish driver had an engine failure in the first session, and they had to change the engine. Didn't get him out until part of the way through the second session. Ended up with the 15th fastest time yesterday. Let's just see where this puts him. And he goes fastest indeed by 0.3 of a second over Mika Salo. He's had some decent results here in the past. Actually got in the points when he was driving for Arrows at Hockenheim on the old circuit, the long circuit, back in 2000. Now Michael Schumacher back on another quick lap, because the first split is up again, 16.6 to the first checkpoint. The first split coming just after they turn off the old track and onto the just after turn 3. Second split, look how far up he is on that.
1 3/4 seconds up.
Yeah, massive lap this coming up from Michael Schumacher. Now, will he keep it going this time?
Well, I think he's going to... I don't know why he did that. It was very strange because he was quickest in first and second sectors and decided just to slow down prior to these final two corners, but now very much up to race speed. It's going to be a 16.031, and in fact that is so far the quickest lap we've seen over the 2 days of running, and we've only had what Michael's his 5th time lap, so a new benchmark time from the world champion, 1:16.031.
And how much would he want pole position here today? Because he's never had pole position at Hockenheim, and well, he's never had it on the old circuit. I wonder whether on the new track here at Hockenheim it might give him his opportunity to grab the top spot. It seems a strange statistic when he's taken just about every other record going in the book, but for some reason the best he's qualified here is second. He's only had the one victory as well, and that was back in 1995.
Well, certainly a big gathering of the media and the press in the pit lane as we go back and have a look into the Arrows team garage. And Harold Frentzen just waiting to go out. Frentzen still, he's done one installation lap. Well, let's have a look and see what Alex Young is doing once again. Slides off the track, and it just matter of very strange place to have done that. But anyway, that's just seemingly on the exit of that little sort of kink in the old back straight, coming down into what is the Aljib curve, the corner that has been potentially the most problematic. Here we look again. Well, he just, in fact, it was the Aljib curve. Slightly further down than he just turned in so late. I mean, how he managed to get himself to turn so late, as if he went way past the corner and then suddenly, oh, I've got to turn right here.
Well, we've seen some action at that corner already yesterday, and even this man Montoya had his moment across the gravel trap. Let's just watch him now coming through the stadium, through these huge grandstands that surround this entire motordrome area, although an increase in the number of grandstand seats here this year with the revisions to the track as well. And now he heads out. Now remember, they used to go on and on here, flat out for ages before they got to the first chicane. Now they turn in here. This is turn 2 through turn 3, and now onto this long curving left-hand sweep where they're building up to maximum speed. Olivier Panis, fast yesterday, hasn't done many laps just yet, but he's going to set a quicker pace now.
Yes, again, you can just see the offline how much dust there is. And drivers will maybe be going down that a little bit just to try and get a feel for what it would be like to make an overtaking manoeuvre if you have opportunity. But Mike is certainly creating opportunities for himself once again, getting purples in the first and second sectors on the timing screen. That's button 5 on your remote control if you want to follow him. So Michael Schumacher on course to be the first driver to break into the 1:15s if he can maintain the pace that we're seeing in these first two sectors, of course following Olivier Panis on the stage as he comes into the Sachs curve. 1:15.815. Michael Schumacher has broken that 1/16 second barrier, and well, judging by the pace of Bridgestone yesterday and the fact that the tyre could last forever and a day, that must be slightly worrying for Michelin, who probably have got a tyre which is more akin to what we saw in Manicourt. Not a qualifying tyre per se, but a tyre that was just too soft for the Williams team to run in the race. McLaren ran it very successfully indeed. Williams trying to get to that situation.
So now we're riding with Ralph. Let's listen to him through this section. Yes, a bit of both there by the sound of it. Bit of a lift and left foot brake, but of course they're not fully up to speed and grip levels.
Again, Ralph using a lot of left foot braking as he comes in through the Aljib curve, and now down into the Sachs curve. Schumacher has been out, but this is effectively his first serious run of the morning. He's only done an in and out installation lap, and then an out lap now, coming up to the conclusion of his first flying lap of the morning session. Michael is still quickest in 1:15.8. Ralph goes third, 1:17.233.
Let's just watch and listen. Down into turn 2 now, where they turn off the old track. We'll just have a quick look at Bernoldi first of all in the Arrows. What's he been up to? Currently 7th fastest, as you see, and the two Arrows cars just inside the top 10 for one of them yesterday, bouncing over the gravel. This is the same place, I think, into the Aljib curve. Was that into the right-hander?
Yeah, that's the Aljib curve. That's the corner where you come down the 4th of the original straights and you then turn at the end of the straight. Corner never was a problematic corner to the degree we've seen here this weekend, but I think that's because it's a funny corner. It falls away from you. Drivers are using the curve. Look at Coulthard through the Aljib curve. I mean, you don't normally see a car getting that out of control, and I mean that's pretty good by the standard of some we've seen so far this weekend.
Well, David Coulthard, 4th fastest yesterday. Let's just watch him here. back on the power hard through that last corner, and that puts him into 5th place, a 1:17.492. So we've got Michael ahead of Barrichello, Ralf Schumacher 3rd currently, with Montoya 4th, Coulthard now 5th. Then it's Sato, Panis, De La Rosa, Bernaldi and Alan McNish up into the top 10 again. Again, Toyota had a much better day here yesterday than they had in Manicourt. Both cars seem to be pretty competitive. Salo had a little electronics problem at one stage, but otherwise it was fine. Ralf Schumacher, a little bit of a lock-up there, but no problem for the German driver, despite being right behind his teammate Juan Pablo Montoya. So Schumacher across the line, faster again for Michael, a 15.337. So getting quicker and quicker virtually every lap here for Schumacher. It's looking good at the moment for Ferrari.
Well, those car spotters amongst you will have noted that Michael Schumacher, the Ferrari, I think also maybe in the case of Barrichello as well, they've gone back to that wing they started the session with on Friday. They did put downforce on the car through the session, but they've gone back, so they're not running maximum downforce, which is maybe where the time is coming from. And Michael Schumacher, having just established a 1:15.3, has once again improved in that first sector, one and a 16.446. Ruben Barrichello we're watching right now. Barrichello giving personal bests in first and second sectors, and not, well, 2/10 away in the first sector, looking to see in the second sector.
Went a bit wide there though, John, so he's lost a tenth or two, and he's not quite as quick as Michael. Let's just ride on board with him.
Well, Barrichello is second quickest. He will improve this time, but 16.0 when he picked up nearly a second, in fact, in this lap, but some 7/10 of a second away from his teammate. But it just indicates how good that car is. I mean, yeah, straight out of the box, bang.
But Michael Schumacher really does seem to be enjoying his experience of this revised circuit. Jarno Trulli had problems yesterday. He went off at the Sachs curve and put it into the gravel, so was unable to complete the rest of the session. And their disappointing day, generally, in terms of pace as well. German driver here, Nick Heidfeld, with his own supporters in the crowd this weekend. Bit of work going on there.
That's just the helmet. I just wondered whether he was using the hand system, but it's not. It's just the paint scheme, the way it comes up around the back of the helmet. That's just the paint scheme of Nick Heidfeld's race helmet. But next year, of course, that hands system, that's the hands and neck support system, will be mandatory. Some drivers not very comfortable with using it and finding it restrictive. It limits the amount of neck movement that you have. So it is going to be mandatory next year, and is a step forward in terms of driver safety.
Great view through that first turn. You can see how tight it is, how accurate you have to be onto the apex. And he's backed it off now as he slows down, checks his mirrors, has a look around, see if there's anyone he's going to be holding up. In fact, Coulthard's the next up behind him, although he's not that close. You can hear the difference in engine note as he changes up early on this slowing down lap, bringing the car back towards the pit lane once again. Michael Schumacher in absolutely blistering form. There is Raikkonen, I think, in fact.
Very, very wide coming out of turn 2. I mean, he seemed to be well off the line on the exit of the corner, but nevertheless, Kimi Raikkonen, having not done very many laps this morning, this is his 4th lap, having either just sat it out, waiting for the circuit to maybe marginally clean up, but the lap times that are seeing from Ferrari, and particularly Michael Schumacher, he wants to be out on track, I think, rather than watching from the pits.
So both McLarens out there now. Was that Villeneuve. A little bit of a spin? That was Villeneuve going quite slowly.
He just went off at Ajip, coming out of the exit of Ajip once again, as we've seen him do on Friday. And Jacques Villeneuve maybe trying as usual to be quicker than the circuit is capable of. Oh, Kimi Raikkonen again in the Ajip curve. It's been virtually every lap we've seen the DC dives into the pits at the very last minute, as we watch Raikkonen coming through the Opel curve and then into the Soot curve.
Bit of a mistake there, turning into the first part.
Three mistakes that we have seen for Raikkonen on this lap.
Perhaps just finding that the grip level's not what he expected on this second day.
Talking about grip levels, talking about the back end coming around to meet the front. Well, the young Finn certainly had to be quick on it. This is what we watched a little minute ago. Jacques Villeneuve coming through the Ajip watch. He was riding the curb before, and Friday certainly, they just runs wide and the exit he's wide too early. Then he gets this big sort of rally cross. I mean, the car very, very sideways. Great job in controlling it. Now watch Raikkonen doing the same thing, going out of the north side. This is the north curve.
Yeah, lots of oversteer, lots of sideways driving for Jacques Villeneuve. We saw a great shot of him, remember, at Manicourt last week, doing a real dirt tracking style, and he seems to be doing it again. He was one of the few drivers who didn't really have anything positive to say about the track revisions. He liked the old track and says it's just like any other track now. Doesn't really like the approach into that corner. He reckons that there's a wall ahead of you as well as you come into the one he went wide at, and just says it's not as interesting to drive, no real dramatic corners. So Villeneuve perhaps not as keen as many of the other drivers. Most of them were very positive indeed after their initial acquaintance with it yesterday. Heidfeld crosses the line, he goes fourth fastest, 2 Ferraris at the top of the table at the moment. The Jordans are currently Takuma Sato in 10th place. Fisikella's down in 16th, hasn't done that many laps. Meanwhile, Peter Windsor's caught up with Jordan's technical boss, Gary Anderson.
Gary, all a bit quiet this morning. Mind you, the temperature's down a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit down. The track seems to be a bit dirty, so we're just waiting, because you have to start Saturday with a new set of tyres, really. So you don't want to just go and throw away the information you can gather on them, so we'll wait a little while and see if the track cleans up.
Surprising that it's dirty. We did have some supporting events yesterday after Formula 1 practice.
Yeah, I think it's just a normal thing of a few people getting the gravel trap, cars driving around, the night air, moisture, all that stuff mounts up in the trees here, you know, get a lot of moisture on the track. So I think it's just a matter of a couple of cars running for 5 laps, it'll be all right.
What was the feedback on Giancarlo's engine problem yesterday?
It had a fairly major failure, yes. I think we all saw that. So, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. I think everything's pushing to the limit, so you have to accept it now and again.
Is the Honda spec the same here as Manicourt, or have they gone one step further?
No, the spec we're running today is the same as we had in Manicourt for qualifying, and we're going to race that as well. So, yeah, it's a good step.
Did you hear that Olivier Panis, soon after Giancarlo had his crash at Manicourt, Olivier Panis wondered what was going to happen to his race engine to see if he could get it to use in the race?
I think they're a little bit different. I don't think ours would fit in their car, vice versa, so we're hanging on to it.
Thanks very much.
So Gary Anderson, and well, as we've heard, they haven't done too many laps in the first part of the session. At the moment, Sato down in 12th, as I said, and Fisichella actually has just moved up the order. Let's just see, where has he gone? No, 18th place. He's moved down, somebody else moving up. Truly on a reasonable lap at the moment. Jenson Button also on track, so both Renaults attacking and seeing if they can improve on what they did yesterday, as Kimi Raikkonen now being pushed down to 7th position.
I think it's interesting listening to Gary, what he was saying, and noticing Gary must be doing very well, because he's got about 4 stomachs there as he was talking to Peter Windsor. Nevertheless, I mean, the track and all the things, and, I mean, all very logical, very well reasoned, rationalised. Schumacher has gone, well, what, 7/10 of a second quicker than he did yesterday. Barrichello's improved. So have Ralf Schumacher just improved as well, as have the 2 Saibers. So while what Gary says may be true, you know, sometimes you can sucker yourself into believing, oh, we'll wait it out until the track cleans up. You know, get out there, guys, get some laps in. Don't worry about using the tyres up too much, and particularly the Bridgestone tyre, which we're looking at here on the Sauber. It appears to have the life of a 24-hour race in it. So, you know, sometimes I don't know what teams are talking about.
Well, Heidfeld being pushed back in, and he'll be reasonably happy with that fastest time. Just looking at the speed traps, it's Michael Schumacher who's topping the main speed trap, heading down towards the hairpin at the moment. 320 kilometres per hour exactly. So we're at the 200-mile-an-hour mark once again, and we'll see if in qualifying that picks up just over that speed. Felipe Massa had a 1 or 2 little incidents yesterday, ripped the front wing off after he went off on Fisikella's oil, so that was all a bit dramatic, but he's just taking it fairly calmly at the moment.
Strange again, Massa had a personal quickest time in that first sector. Now he's decided to back off. Now he may have a problem we're not aware of, and we did see Michael Schumacher do that earlier in the session, where he was giving purples in one of the zones and backed out of it.
Bit of interference on the radio there with Nick Heidfeld's communication system to Sauber, but we'll try and listen out as much as possible. Meanwhile, Jarno Trulli is on track, and looking at his split time there, 17.3 to the first checkpoint, 36.2 to the second one. They still don't seem to be putting in any particularly quick laps.
No, and just listening to Nick Heidfeld talking about the grip, seems to twabble with his wires. Renault, I should say, Trulli is 14th, Jenson Button is in 15th place, on 18 zeros a piece. So, well, that's an improvement. They've gained about 0.6 of a second, but they need to be looking to gain probably about 2.6 seconds to be in the show here this afternoon.
So there is the standings at the moment. Schumacher, Barrichello, there's a surprise. Ferrari 1-2, but it might be a different story come qualifying. We've seen so much in recent races. The Williams not really doing a great deal in the free practice sessions in terms of times, doing a great deal in terms of work, of course, but not showing their pace perhaps until we actually get into the qualifying session. And a lot of that has been down to Montoya himself. He just monsters it in qualifying and manages to drag a lap out of somewhere that no one else can quite achieve.
Yeah, there's a pretty big gap, I mean, from first down to fifth, and then from fifth all the way down to 13th. There's less than a second covering those cars. And
So Massa getting well into it, and well, currently they're doing pretty well, those two boys, 4th and 5th in the two Saubers, so that shows well, and the Bridgestone tyre working very effectively, obviously, in these early stages. Now, talking of what's going on for next year, we know that Arrows, of course, there's been a lot of question marks. We're looking at Enrique Bernaldi. One of the people that's been mentioned in connection with the Arrows team is Craig Pollock. Of course, he also acts as Jacques Villeneuve's manager and no doubt involved in negotiations with David Richards at the moment to what's happening next year. Bruce Jones managed to catch up with Craig Pollock.
Craig Pollock, on Monday we had BAR announcing Jenson Button for one of the race seats next year. Your man Jacques Villeneuve, there's no mention as yet as to whether he'll be driving there.
Well, he's sitting here with a very solid contract signed with British American Racing. It's last year of a 3-year contract, and he has every intention of racing with British American Racing next year, and I think that he thinks that Jenson's going to be a very positive feature in the team.
But one rumour that's bouncing around at the moment, people are saying that Jacques might take a sabbatical next year like Mika did this year. Is that a complete no-no?
There's no question of Jacques taking a sabbatical. It's never even come into his mind to take a sabbatical, but I don't see any reason to do it. I think he's in Formula One for the next few years to come, and he would certainly finish his career in Formula One.
Craig, thanks very much. We shouldn't believe the journalist, should we?
Never do that.
So trying to clarify that, there had been a lot of rumours around that Jacques might sit it out next year, and so Panis and Button would be together in the team, but Craig Pollock doing his best to put a stop to those rumours.
Well, I can't see any merit in the idea of a sabbatical. I think you're a racing driver or you stop, and effectively Mika Häkkinen stopped last year and that was called sabbatical, but I read sabbatical in that situation as retirement. Just I think they were being kind to Mika and not making such an abrupt change to his life. Nevertheless, Villeneuve does have a contract for next year, but we understand that the team and David Richards would like to roll that into a 4-year deal, and I think that's where there may be some discussion between the various parties as to what will or will not be the terms and conditions for 2003.
Barrichello's up on the split time of Michael Schumacher, so we're going to perhaps see an improvement here from the Brazilian. Great overhead view looking down on the car. We've gone through the new section. We're now back in the older part where they used to arrive with the cars having just been doing 220 miles an hour along the long straights through the chicanes, and then they'd slither around this section. Now with lots more downforce, it's a little easier. Not quite as fast as Michael, just over 1/10 of a second slower, but we've got both Ferraris now in the low 115s, and the next closest car 1.5 seconds slower. That's Ralf Schumacher.
Just interestingly, Barrichello and Michael Schumacher have both achieved their fastest laps on their 9th lap, so no driver, none of the two have done a lot more than the other. Michael did his earlier, in fact his time was done on an earlier lap. Nevertheless, both have done 9 laps, I should say. Michael just going back out of the pits to begin another run, 1:15.337, contrasting to Rubens 1:14.470. And Ralf Schumacher looking like he's improving. He's got personal bests in first and second as we see Ralf come into the stadium again, running very, very wide in this Ajip corner. Traffic just staying, Olivier Panis just staying out to the right, not impeding Ralph in any way whatsoever.
Now let's watch last part of the lap. That was very neat and tidy, not much correction required on the steering through there, so plenty of grip, and that's an improvement in time for Ralf Schumacher. Not in position because they're still a way away, but from being 1.6 seconds behind Michael, he's now 1 second behind him.
And somebody else who's improved substantially, and this will bring a smile to Eddie Jordan's face, is Takuma Sato. He's gone 5th quickest on a 1:17.094. Whoa, 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 that's exciting.
That was Ralph running a little wide. Now, I believe we have the opportunity to speak to Peter Sauber. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Great to have you.
Please, slowly and clear, because my English is not so good.
Well, we shall do our best. Thank you for joining us this morning. Now, for you guys, this is not quite a home race, but it's about as close as you get to being at home. A good spirit in the Sauber team, particularly with good performance this morning. Nick is currently 4th and Felipe 6th. You must be happy.
Yes, we are happy, but in the moment we have a problem with the hydraulic system from Nick's car.
Right, well that's disappointing. Yes, I see he's only done 6 laps. Do you think you will be able to get this fixed very quickly, or will it take some time?
I think we need some time, yes.
Now, a revised track this weekend at Hockenheim. What is the feeling amongst the drivers, your 2 drivers and indeed engineers, about the revisions to Hockenheim?
I think the drivers like the new circuit, like the spectators, also for the technicians. For sure, the new track it's better. It's not a stop and go like before. Before we had very high speed, and then the 3 chicanes, and now the track is very, very fluent.
Well, we've just seen Michael Schumacher having a spin on our coverage here, Peter, but he's okay. He's making it back into the pits. You have 2 great drivers this year, 2 young, hard-pushing drivers. How would you rate, particularly Felipe's performance, his first season of Grand Prix racing? How do you think he's progressed?
In the moment, it's difficult to say that. He has a lot of pressure. And my opinion is a young driver, he is only 21 years old, needs time to have the possibility to be better.
Well, thank you very much for joining us in the programme, Peter, and we'll let you get back to the hard work required today.
Well, this is the moment where Michael Schumacher got it all sideways in the Opel curve. He managed to just about cut across the grass and go into the pit lane. I'm not entirely sure that's in the sporting regulations, but fighting to retain control. And he didn't want to do an additional lap, so he just decided, well, I'm going to go grass tracking. He made it into the pit lane. Ross Brawn's face, you can see the look of concern as Michael does that. And I think that you might find there'll be an email coming across to Ross saying, what did your driver do? Nevertheless, that was a lap which Michael Schumacher would have seen a further improvement, because he had purpled in first and second sectors, pushing very hard in the stadium and just pushed that little bit too hard. As you ride on board with Fisichella, at this part of track, it went wrong for Michael.
Yeah, it looks much neat and tidier for Giancarlo Fisichella. Let's see whether this moves him up the order, brings him up to 10th place. Good effort. So his teammate Takuma Sato is 6th, and of course for Sato, he's going to a track that no one has an advantage at, really, because they're all learning it afresh. The stadium section fairly straightforward to get to grips with, and so Sato enjoying that opportunity. 6th fastest at the moment, as you can see. Panis is up there again. You know, he's been quick all weekend, and let's not forget that BAR Honda also had a good run here last year. We're looking in the Sauber pits on the master channel at the moment, and you can see the work that's going on Heidfeld's car after that hydraulic problem that Peter Sauber told us about. So that's a little bit of a concern for the team.
Yes, it means the car's got to be put up in the axle stands. They've got to take the underbody off, and all those parts are fitted basically as low within the chassis as possible, so access is slow. And of course time drifts away in this 45-minute session. Just got 7.5 minutes remaining as we watch David Coulthard come across the line. Coulthard, well, he goes to 5th quickest on a 17.021. But I mean, that's 1.7 or 1684 away from the time Michael Schumacher established a little earlier, and in fact Michael would have improved on that time had he not made that error in the final 2 corners.
Let's ride with the Frenchman a second here, the BAR Honda of Panis. He's doing well. He's on another quick lap by the looks of things, and this should improve from 6th.
Yeah, it's just 0.8 of a second away, and this could bring him within a second, let's say, of Michael Schumacher, and we'll put him somewhere in the middle 116s, put him up from 6th, possibly to 4th. I think that would be about the best Olivier can expect. Of course, those last 2 corners, easy to lose time.
Yeah, across the line he goes, and in fact he stays in 6th. He did lose time through those last 2 corners, and he'll be a bit frustrated, but good first part to the lap there, and they must be pleased. They struggled somewhat at Manicourt, but here they were a lot better performance, although Villeneuve does seem determined to run wide.
Well, I think Villeneuve just wants to trash his car at some point in this turn. I mean, he's been wide so many times. You know, he's an intelligent man. I don't know why he persists, and he knows what's going to happen. Mika Salo doing very much the same thing. Maybe Mika not quite as bright as Jacques, but nevertheless no fool. But I mean, you see Villeneuve time after time after time doing this, and I mean, he's just wasting his time and the team's time.
Yes, it does seem a little strange to have to keep doing it. Massa spins.
Yes, Villeneuve coming around. Oh dear me! Now that was Villeneuve will be in trouble for that. There was yellow flags out there. He came round at full race speed as Massa was just moving away. He went round the outside, and that was a situation, I have to say, not unreminiscent of what happened to his father a long time ago, 20 years ago in fact.
Let's take a look at this. Massa comes into the corner, penultimate corner, spins it, and then we have to look in the background.
Now watch for the lights coming on. Where are the lights? There's a Renault coming through. Where are the lights? Well, they don't come up on screen that time. They were there, but look, Jacques Villeneuve comes round absolutely flat out, and very close call indeed for both drivers.
So they both get away with it. Frentzen is just improving slightly on his lap, although he's down in 15th place at the moment. In fact, he's come back into the pits. We're looking at Jenson Button at the moment. And Jensen's had a good record at Hockenheim on the old circuit. He's been in the points in both previous German Grand Prix that he has contested. And that's a pretty good effort, because in both Grand Prix, he started a long way back. When he drove for Williams, he qualified 16th, but he had a problem on the formation lap and had to start at the back.
Alex Young down at the heavy bend, not an unfamiliar sight. Alex having a few excursions over today and had a few yesterday as well, getting beached finally in turn 2 and having to leave his car and miss the end of the session.
So across the line goes Button, but he's still down in 15th place. Trulli's still 17th, so they still don't seem to have got the Renaults working effectively here, and they'll be very disappointed about that.
And you said of boots on board for Juan Pablo Montoya, and just let me tell you, Giancarlo Fisichella went unnoticed, has gone a very good 1:16.9, and that puts him 5th quickest.
Let's take a look at what Frentzen's been up to. Same place we saw Villeneuve, same place as Salo ran wide a moment ago. Very neat and tidy for Frentzen, didn't get too crossed up, but of course losing time because of it, having to lift. David Coulthard currently in 4th place and on a faster lap.
Yes, David Coulthard, slight improvement in that first sector. Of course, that first sector relatively straightforward. And David pretty good on the exit out of the little kink in what is remaining of that remaining final straight at Hockenheim. Just about keeps it in control, 0.8 of a second away. So David Coulthard also looking at improvement. It's Ralf Schumacher who's half a second ahead of him. So Coulthard could potentially move up to 3rd, just depends on these final 2 corners. Good entry into that final Sud curve, now comes out. Cross start finish line, David Coulthard, he remains in 4th place, but it is an improvement in time. Takes him within, well, just over 0.3 of a second of Ralf Schumacher in 3rd place.
The yellow's flashed up for a moment. I think Trulli had a spin at turn 2 and has now got going again, so that's why we saw the yellow lights just flash onto the top of the screen very, very briefly. But Trulli remains down in 17th place as the Sauber team continue to work on Heidfeld's car and get these problems sorted out. Only 6 laps for him. Oh, and
that is Jenson Button, yes.
Yeah, the other Renault, and he's pulled off, just going down. That's out.
Okay, Jens, no problem.
Well, he's actually facing the wrong way, so I don't think he's just pulled off. I think he's had a bit of a spin there.
Yeah, you can see the earth just by the side of the car, and there it is. Oh, he's hit the barrier too. He's hit the barrier, fairly old clump. Now, we're showing that.
That's coming out of the first corner, John. It's, it's one of those classic, we've seen it in the past.
It's gone across the racetrack, spun actually across the racetrack, that's why. And that's a classic place where we've seen cars in the past So he's come out of turn one, and something's gone wrong, and he's clumped fairly, well, luckily in one respect, unfortunately in the other, that he actually happened to hit the barrier. Whether that was a cause or effect, we can see.
Oh, it's turn two in. No, we're looking here. This was Trulli earlier. This was when I mentioned the yellows first came out, so it was, I think, a relatively harmless spin for Jarno Trulli.
Giving Eddie Irvine and Alex Young a bit of a wake-up call. Young all over the back of Irvine, passing under a yellow. I mean, what is he doing? I mean, what's that kid up to?
Well, that's it now. This was the other situation. Yes. He did make contact with the wall there, and he must have lost it on the exit, ran wide out of the first corner.
And that's the first car I think we've seen actually do a spin on the exit of turn one, which is a particularly quick corner. Montoya goes third quickest, Juan Pablo Montoya 1:16.192. That was a new set of tyres. Remember, we watched Montoya coming down the pit lane on a brand new set of rubber, and that's the benefit for the Williams BMW driver.
Yeah, but he's still 0.8 of a second off Michael Schumacher.
Okay. I said yesterday when we were walking around, it sounds like maybe we want to go roll stiffness rearwards, aero rearwards, because
there's a lot of work going on there at Renault. They're scratching their heads. They're talking about fairly major changes still, because they're just not providing the performance.
Well, the driver's not getting the feel from the car. He cannot just simply open the throttle or turn the steering wheel. The two fundamentals of being a Grand Prix driver. That's what we're saying Juan Pablo Montoya being able to do.
So Montoya, let's see what he can do. The next split, the tyre performance has gone away a little bit perhaps, and he's 0.3 of a second down. Great view from the front-mounted camera on the Williams here. Montoya, who led the early part of the race at Hockenheim last season, and then had a very poor pit stop, and ultimately that effectively led to his retirement. Across the line is 15.8, so it is actually an improvement on that lap from Montoya. A good effort on the latter part of the lap particularly.
Well, he actually had personal bests in all three sectors, but that first sector, for some reason, we were comparing it against others, it sort of seemed slightly down. But here's the man, Michael Schumacher, fastest in sector one of all, currently fastest on a 15.337. Now we watch to see as he comes out of that hairpin bend, what is he going to do as he comes into second sector? The flag is
somebody else off. Barrichello, I think.
Ferrari.
Yeah, it's Barrichello off, and that's a funny place, because that is the last couple of corners.
It's
just
here to the left, yes.
Yeah, so that's an unusual place, and the yellows are out, obviously. Somebody else just putting a wheel over the edge.
That's Raikkonen coming out of the Aljib curve. Michael fastest in second sector. Now there will be yellow flags in that final two corners. Michael Schumacher comes out of the Sachs curve. Will he back off, or will he just keep his foot in it? He's not slowing down that much. Well, he has backed off now. Yes, he has. He backed off. He saw the lights. He was given the warning. And unfortunately, we don't know what this lap would have been, because clearly it was going to exceed his 1:15.337. And it comes around as a 1:16.565. So, Rubens Barrichello off in the barriers. And unexpectedly so. That's the corner we saw Michael lose it, and then he had to make that quick cut to get into the pit lane. So it isn't all plain sailing for Ferrari. It's not as easy as it maybe looks.
No, but the times are certainly coming, as they set the fastest two times once again in this session, as they did on Friday, but with one or two little incidents along the way. So Barrichello's car will now have to be brought back to the pits and checked over. So there you can see, just alongside the grid he is, where he's ended up.
And you can see just how close that barrier is to the edge of the track. The cars are coming around the Sud curve. It's a quick corner, it's fourth gear corner now. And sliding over the blue and white curbing, even over that green concrete strip. So if you get it wrong, the chance to recover is pretty small.
Let's see, on the exit, just back end just swapped on him, and around she went now. Just touched the barrier there at the end of the tyres.
Now the problem that Rubens has got is there's only 30 minutes between the end of this session and the start of the next final 45-minute session, and the Ferrari team are going to have to work pretty rapidly to get Rubens out. Now we assume there's not very much damage, primarily it'll be superficial, but when the front end takes a dig like that, you just need to be very careful and check that there's no damage that's sort of beyond the initial what I would call superficial wishbone steering arms and maybe uprights and wheel.
Unusual sort of spin, wasn't it, John? It just broke away. It looked to be going fairly progressively, but he just couldn't get it back. Almost makes you wonder whether they'd changed something on the setup of the car, which just caught him out a little bit.
Well, I think he was caught out, because we've not seen anybody again at that part of that corner do what Rubens has done, and therefore you've assumed that something may have been changed on the car, which led to the back end getting away. And once it started to go, then the process, it was inevitable. The pendulum effect just carried the rear of the car around, and poor Rubens walks back to the pits, and he'll rue that little incident at the very end of a session. He knows it's going to take about 10 minutes for the car to be craned up and delivered back to the pits, and then the session will be 20 minutes away, and the team he will not be out at the start of this next 45-minute session. In fact, if he gets out within 20 minutes of the start of it, I think he'll be fairly lucky.
So let's take a look at the times from the first session this morning. Michael Schumacher ahead of Barrichello, then it's Montoya and Ralph with David Coulthard fifth, then a whole bunch of Bridgestone runners. So in the midfield battle, certainly looks like Bridgestone have the advantage. Massive Fisichella there, so is Olivier Panis. Nick Heidfeld only did the 6 laps, but despite that he still ended up with the 9th fastest time. Takuma Sato doing well in the other Jordan, so it looks as though the two Jordans might be a little more on the pace here today than we have seen in a couple of the recent events, although Sato, having said that, was on for a good qualifying position in Manicourt. They just put him out for his last run, and perhaps a little early. Bernoldi 11th ahead of Villeneuve. Raikkonen, well, we'll see some more pace from him, I'm sure, in the second session. Salo 14th ahead of Button, and that really, again, the story, the fact that Button and Trulli still languishing down there in the teens. 15th for Button and 17th for Trulli. At the back, Mark Webber and Alex Young, and once again, all 22
Rubens Barrichello
cars
flying along there, and then unfortunately just went off at the circuit there.
We've got to try now to see where is the limit of the car, and unfortunately step out a little bit, and I was following another car maybe a little bit too close, and I lost the back end a little.
But you're supposed to know that corner. That's one of the ones they haven't changed.
Well, sort of, because it's the curb on the outside made a little bit tighter as well, but it's not a problem. A small crash.
See you later. Thanks.
A fairly relaxed Rubens Barrichello. Bruce Jones catching up with him as he makes his way back down into the pits. And here on F1 Digital Plus, we'll catch up with everybody just as soon as they step out of the car, given half a chance.
And interesting is Stefania from Ferrari. She's the press officer. She handles all the press releases from Ferrari. Immediately down with Barrichello to hear what was being said in that interview. Everything a Ferrari driver says is monitored by a member of the team. They never get the opportunity, or not even permitted, to speak to the media unless there's a representative from the team alongside them.
Yeah, it's all very controlled, and keeping a close eye on what the driver's saying. But they're just taking another look at that replay.
Yeah, I think that's just down to Rubens. I don't think the car ahead of him did come into play whatsoever. And as Rubens said, well, you're on the limit. He did clip the curb on the inside. That might have just caused a little bit of instability in the rear, in a car that has got the most stable back end of any Formula One car currently racing. So there we see this process of dragging the car off the barrier now onto the back of a flatbed truck. It's got to find a gap in that concrete wall to get it back to the pit lane to Ferrari to unload it. So a little bit of a 3-point turn from the truckie as he reverses down into the pit lane, and then it'll be taken down to the Ferrari pit. No doubt the media will be there in their throngs to get any opportunity to photograph the car. Ferrari will do everything they can to cover the car up to make sure that nothing is seen by eyes that shouldn't be prying into those little inner secrets of the car. And Michael somewhat studying the times. Yeah, he seems fairly content, I would say.
Yeah, he should be pretty happy. Fastest overall once again. Let's take a look back over the highlights.